The weekly message of the United Church of Christ of Hummelstown, Pennsylvania, a podcast version of our worship service. To learn more and listen to the rest of the worship, check us out online at hummelstownucc.org.
I grew up in a family of 5, 3 kids, 2 parents, which translates well to the days of the week, right? And so at one point, the family chose days on which to make dinner for everyone. In this way, we sought to share the load. Each person, one day, and a day for leftovers, and something easy like a take-and-bake pizza. And sure, having your middle school or older elementary kids make dinner means that sometimes there's going to be some mishaps. We did pretty well. There was the time I made macaroni and cheese but didn't drain the water, and so we had cheese-flavored glue. Or the time my sister cooked the hamburger before making them into patties. But in the end, it meant that everyone knew how to cook at least a few things. It was much more a given that the younger of us would make the same meals. Macaroni and cheese and hot dogs was very common for my night. And certainly more advanced for my parents. That was when we might have the lasagnas. But by the time I was in high school and chose a vegetarian lifestyle, my parents could easily say it was my responsibility to make my own meal if I didn't want to have what the family was going to eat. Because they could trust that I knew at least something about meal prep. It was a skill that I have had a lot of need for in future years. And so as I reflect on my experience of feeding my siblings and this story of Jacob and Esau, I see how important those feeding skills are. Not just for those who use them to manipulate situations, but to be able to show appropriate gratitude for what our siblings do for us. We don't live in the status quo of this ancient family anymore. And as society-defined gender roles continue to shift, there is becoming a widespread expectation that everyone should know how to feed oneself. It isn't the job of only those who spend their time in the tents. So where is the justice and where is the challenge with this passage today? The story of Jacob and Esau is one that twists and turns and flips the script on what is expected and who it's expected of. In a story that begins with the phrase, "These are the descendants of Isaac," there certainly aren't many of them, just the 2. And those only after decades of time, with just Rebekah and Isaac. Interestingly, before this portion of the text, we learn that Keturah, Abraham's wife after Sarah, had 6 sons, who also had many children. And then we learn that Ishmael has 12 sons already, who themselves are having children. In other words, Abraham has many sons, and his seed is spreading in the world. But that wasn't the promise. The promise was not through any of these. It is through Isaac. And Isaac, unlike his father, only takes Rebekah as his wife and the bearer of his children. So when we are told of an expected abundance, we don't find it here yet. So what shall we do? This story continues to turn our expectations around. If we're expecting a distraught mother praying to God, or if you're expecting a promise told to the father, neither of these happen. In Abraham, we have a father who speaks with God and a mother who prays and, takes things into her own hands. In Isaac, we have a father who prays and a mother who speaks directly with God. Just as Hagar receives a clear answer and a time of conversation with God, Rebekah, too, is offered the same privilege of hearing the reasons direct from God, of getting some assurance. She hears God out of her pain, which it appears to be quite severe, understandably. To have a single child in this time, this community, would have been a struggle. But to have twins? This is a hard road she has to walk down. And in this expectant births, We are meant to glimpse an impossible feat coming true, turning this pinch point into a place of potential abundance. From the father of the promise, we only are supposed to look on one single child. From that one single child, we only have two to look for the promise to enter through. But abundance comes at a cost. Having twins out of an impossible pregnancy sounds probably like a joke to Rebekah, much like Rebekah's mother-in-law, who laughs at the prediction of her forthcoming child in her old age. This next generation reminds us that God is here for the impossible becoming possible still, reminding us that some of the holiest things are laughable, ridiculous, incomprehensible, not reasonable in the world. And talk about laughable, the behavior of both Jacob and Esau is completely out of scale. Their relationship begins with vying for control at birth. So it shouldn't be surprising that they continue this throughout their growing up. They choose very different lives to live. They choose to understand family in very different ways. They clearly have some different ideas on best behavior. Jacob, in contrast to his father, is anything but passive in his relationship with God, his assumption of his part of the promise. Jacob is questionable in his motives, and his mother later enables his jealousy, and probably did from the get-go. If you're told by God that you have one chosen child, you probably favor that chosen child. He uses his abilities to put his brother at a disadvantage, knowing that the work he does is physical and hard. And yet Esau is short-sighted. And in this moment, his younger brother takes advantage of his impetuousness. Esau could not see any value in this intangible birthright, in this covenant with God, when this tangible and tasty red stuff was right before him. There's a point here to consider about human behavior and what we do when we don't think beyond our desires in the moment. We've often heard of delayed gratification, but sometimes we are just as quick to give up a better future for instant gratification. What he gave up was the role of patriarch for the family, the double portion of an inheritance, the social security and status that comes with that. And it would be easy to demonize either of these men. And what they are, truly, is complicated men. In a lineage God has decided for God's reasons to bless. Jacob is neither evil nor perfectly virtuous. He's human. So is Esau. This does not excuse them, but it does help us reflect on the way God's work gets done through ordinary people. Esau, like Ishmael before him, will also amass great wealth and become a leader of nations. So though he isn't the promised, he does receive part of that promise. In both stories, the birth and the birthright, Jacob grasps and takes that which is not his. The birthright, this inheritance. Later written down in Deuteronomy, the law states that the firstborn son gets a double share of the inheritance. It's like a law that seems to be at play here. Esau, as the firstborn, should get 2/3 of Isaac's wealth, while Jacob is left with 1/3. At least until he sells away that birthright to his brother for that lentil stew. After this moment will come the time for Esau to receive this blessing, and at a later time, and whether because Esau never fully intended to give it to Jacob, or Rebekah was worried about her oracle from God that would not come true, they will conspire to make sure the actual blessing is offered to Jacob in disguise, as Esau has allowed to have happen. And yet Esau responds with justified anger. He will say to him, is he not rightly called Jacob, meaning supplanted? For he has supplanted me these 2 times. He took away my birthright, and now he's taken away my blessing. But was it his to give or to take? This particular blessing is the promise of God passed down from Abraham to Isaac and now to Jacob. Descendants, land, the bearing of the blessing. Cursed be anyone who curses you, and blessed be everyone who blesses you, we're told. These are the things promised to Abraham at the beginning of this saga back in chapter 12. It's the taking of these from Esau that precipitates the family rupture and Jacob's flight from Esau's rage, a story that we will hear more of next week. Jacob is neither a moral exemplar nor a villain. He's complicated. He is described in terms that say he has always been aware of God and willing and able to go the length needed to play the part. It isn't a comfortable understanding of him, but it's true and it's honest. He is to be the origin of the people. He is the one to continue this Abrahamic line and live into the world to be. And he does this by feeding his brother and committing to the journey he's called to walk. When I made dinner for my family as a child and youth, I wasn't thinking about how I might use them to hold over them. I knew it was my part to play in the service of the family. And as uncomfortable as this makes me, maybe that's also true of Jacob. Jacob will be possessed almost by this stolen blessing. Yet his singular focus upon it allows the promise to be realized in ways that were expected for him. God makes this pact to work through the descendants of Abraham and build a new way in the world. And we are a part of that lineage and have the opportunity to take responsibility for the part that is ours to play, to respect the needs of others and the misuse of blessings by ourselves and others. Jacob's focus on that blessing will shape the rest of his life. The blessing will bring wealth and children, but it will also mean exile, loss, and sorrow. This is the life of faith for people in all places. To be open is to be the challenge. And in that challenge is a vision of God's justice for all. So may we be strong enough to call to account those who manipulate. May we be honorable enough to claim it in ourselves. May we have the grace to offer the nourishment others need without expecting payment. May we go beyond self-focused thinking to dream the bigger dream. These are what we might take away from Jacob and Esau. May it be so today. Amen.
This has been the weekly worship from the United Church of Christ of Hummelstown. No matter who you are, or where you are, on life's journey, you are welcome here. Join us online or in person, at 104 East Main Street in Hummelstown, Sundays at 10:30 a.m. Thank you for listening today. We look forward to your fellowship.